Hey everyone, it's Clint. Welcome to Sweetcast. I want to do a series of videos on how to write comics. I've had people ask about this over time. I did a series years ago on how to write comics, and I've learned quite a bit since then. And so I just want to share some of this. Hopefully, it'll be helpful to you. Maybe you're writing a comic for the first time. Maybe you've been around the block a time or two, and I know just like anybody else, it's really helpful to hear about somebody else's writing process. One, it can inspire you when you need inspiration to overcome the writer's block. Sometimes just hearing about how somebody else writes helps you do that. Or two, it's just professional development. Like there's, if you're always searching on content on how to write, it's going to help you be a better writer. So for whatever reason you're here, appreciate it. I am a little bit about me. I am a comic book writer. I am published, though I would don't. I would argue that that doesn't really matter as much as people put weight on it. If you're writing, you are a writer. The goal is to become a better writer, a good writer, or a great writer. In any case, you're always trying to improve. So this is video one. Video one is coming up with the concept or the idea. This is a question a lot. So it doesn't matter how you get inspiration for an idea. Maybe you're dreaming and you come up with a dream that's the perfect story. I've heard people tell that before, though I would argue that there's so much refinement for that idea that dreams can be great, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't mean it was a gift to you. And you need to stick exactly with that idea, but it can be helpful. So there's that. Sometimes coming up with the story concept can be an awful lot of work, and you are really trying to tell a certain kind of story. Or perhaps you have been hired on to write a character that you don't own at all. It's a pre-existing character continuing a series. And in that case, your ideas are not going to be completely fresh. As far as what the story is, you're going to be focusing your ideas on how you're going to continue that story, if that makes sense. In any case, stories are made up with a whole bunch of concepts, a whole bunch of ideas. The important thing is not to be married to any single idea like it's the greatest thing ever. You have to be willing to collect ideas and be willing to throw them out. And like I think Neil Gaiman said this, I know a lot of writers will say this: you have a compost pile or you have a parts bin of ideas. Maybe you don't use something, it gets chopped from a story, and you'd be surprised later on as you're writing something else that can actually be a good well of great ideas for your story. And so don't totally throw out ideas, just know that maybe this is not the right time for them. So what I want to do in this is I'm actually going to use one of my ideas, and I'm going to take this same idea through the whole series. I have way more ideas than I can work with that I'll be able to publish. And so this is actually a recent one. This is one when I couldn't sleep. It was not a dream. It was I could not sleep, and I started thinking about a concept that kind of interested me. So I thought it would be fun to write an espionage book. I know I want that much. And what would it be like to write something from the perspective of a lackey? Like not even a smart villain. It's somebody very low level, somebody that you take for granted in comics all the time. And let's tell their story. What could be a really interesting story built around that? And why not for a working title? I'm going to call it The Lackey. All right. So, again, you could get inspiration from movies, other comic books, art styles, anything. It doesn't matter. There's no one way to get an idea. But once you have that nugget, then this is how I like to think about it. I don't actually draw things or write things out like this, though you could. I think it would be actually really helpful. My brainstorming sessions will look very different every time. I used to physically write things down in a notebook. I actually still do that sometimes, and sometimes I type it out in Word. In this case, I've got Word, and I made it really neat and tidy. Yours is probably going to get messy. I think if you're really thinking and putting ideas out there, it's okay to get messy. Writers are often known for being slobs. So don't stress about that too much. So here we're not worried about any formatting or anything. But what I have here are some goals, and then I have parameters. And goals to me are, what do you want to achieve with this story? So I already mentioned I want to tell a story about a lackey, somebody, you know, bottom of the pecking order who is a bad guy. Maybe I want a theme to be redemption. I could break this up even further and get into very specific kinds of themes that I want to bring out or explore. Maybe I want it to be about an anti-hero. Maybe I want it to be about failure. How do you become a lackey in the first place? Like, clearly there has to be some history of failure for you to get to that point. I also thought, what would it be like to do a job interview? Like, how does one become a lackey? You can kind of see how I do this. Like, sort of just think out the idea and ask yourself a lot of questions surrounding it, and you'll actually start coming up with more and more and more content that could be great for your story. And so it's helpful to write this out, explore those little trails. And when you find something that's really interesting, I think this is important. If it's interesting to you in a big way initially, chances are it's going to be interesting to somebody else out there in a really big way. If it's an idea that you really have to force, or you don't know if you're so wild about it, I mean, put it on the list, but you really got to think of what is going to make for an interesting story. So I'm gonna continue here. I want to show some cruelty. He's cruel but redeemable, right? If redemption is one of my things, maybe revenge is a motivator. Talking about what motivates your character. This is could be very important. And then maybe even some writing moods. Like, if you want to write a comedy, what kind of comedy do you want to write? In this case, maybe I want it to be really tense, and so I want to focus on writing and building tension. This is important to have goals when you're writing, like, before you start, because you're not going to make a story that does everything. I would argue that that's probably not a very good story. If you want to make a funny story, you want to make it really funny, but you want to make it funny in some very specific ways, and you might even find some very unique tricks and kinds of jokes that you want to do. Again, it's not everything. You want to sort of focus in on what it is that your story, this particular story, is going to be, and we'll focus on how to achieve that later. Parameters. Now, I know that there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with me here. Hear me out. I think it's extremely important, especially in comics, to know what restrictions you have. When I think about some of the most innovative storytelling, it has often happened because of restrictions from a publisher, a format, so many things, right? What do they call it? Something births creativity. If people in prison do some of the most creative things, make the most creative gadgets, and a lot of that is because it's necessity, right? Is that necessity breeds creativity? Something, you get what I mean. So I think it's actually extremely important to know your parameters. If you are writing a comic book, each one of those pages, presumably you're paying an artist to draw this for you. That's usually how it works. It adds up. And so knowing how many pages you're paying for, what your budget is absolutely going to be a parameter. Even if you're incredibly wealthy, you're still going to want to have some kind of parameter set, because if you build your story around those set of parameters, I think it's going to be a much better story than it just being sort of open-ended and you're just kind of going by the seat of your pants. Who's your artist? Now, artists clearly have a lot of opportunity with artists, and they open a lot of doors, but not every artist is going to be able to draw everything. And so you're absolutely restricted by your artist. If you have an artist that does very stylized, cartoony kind of artwork, maybe doing a crime thing, I mean, maybe it's not the right artist for the project. Or if it is, maybe I want to take a slightly different angle with how I'm telling this story. The question is, why would you use this art style for this story? What does it bring to the table? And so I think it's very, very important to understand your artist, their strengths and weaknesses. This is going to make your story so much stronger if you understand that before you write. I realize that that is also a bit of a luxury for some of you. You don't know who your artist is going to be or if it'll ever be drawn, but it's a good question to ask. At least, what kind of artist are you looking for to draw this? I think that's helpful. And then try to stick within those parameters. Let's just say for this story, I'm going to have it be black and white. that'll absolutely affect my storytelling. And that's a parameter. I'm not going to be using color to show things in my story. And so I've got to make sure not to put colors in my script to show things. So that could be important. Am I crowdfunding this? If so, how am I going to pitch it? All of these questions are important. Am I going to submit this to a publisher? If so, what kinds of stories do they want? Is this going to be publishable at all? All of these are important questions. These are parameters I think you should look at. And then last but not least, I'm going to put audience here. Who is your audience? It's a parameter, but it's also a goal, realistically. Who are you telling the story for? Nobody tells stories for everybody. Just that's not how you write a book. Pick an audience and think of that audience as you're writing. And chances are, yes, you're going to catch a wider range of people that are interested in it. But if you focus on an audience, it's going to make your story so much better. So from here, I'm going to let these concepts and ideas percolate. I do the best when I actually obsess over them. I don't know how else to think about it, but I really want to be thinking about these quite a bit. And I might even try drawing some character designs. I might try writing out some histories, or I might even just go ahead and start and put pen to paper, so to speak, or start typing in Microsoft Word and, just go ahead and start writing out a scene with the character in it. All of this is really helpful when you're developing your idea. But just know that all of this could go away. It could change, and be totally willing to do so, change it brutally if you need to in order to serve the story. So I feel pretty good about this. I think this is where we're going to start. Next video, I'll move on to the next phase, and that's going to have to do with outlining your story. So I'll see you in the next video.